All right, so continuing with Sirens of Titan, like I just said, chapters 8 and 9 is what we're going to cover today. There's a little bit that we left from the previous chapter, chapter 7, that I want to go over. Namely, Rumfoord's plan, or I don't know, maybe that's the wrong way to put it up here. I put a question mark. His plan, or at least what he thinks is going to be the results of all his work, his effort to invade Earth, even though he knows the Martians are going to fail and they're all going to die, but he thinks it's all going to work out in the end. So we kind of get an explanation of that at the end of chapter 9, and we never covered that last meeting, so we'll do that at the beginning. But most of the class today, we might have a pretty short lecture today. We might get out a little early because there's not much to it. I don't know. I kind of feel like I want to dwell on the harmoniums for a while, but that's just me. And I don't know if there's enough for y'all to say, but I find these interesting creatures. I'm not quite sure what Vonnegut is trying to say, but it seems to me like I've read this book several times, and I read it last night. I reread this chapter and was just thinking, like, are these the perfect beings for him? Are these like I wouldn't want to be a harmonium. It sounds like a kind of boring existence, right? They've only got like one sense. What is that sense? They don't have sight or smell, touch. That's it, touch, right? They feel vibrations, right? But yeah, they're quite peaceful creatures or something like this, right? Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure what's the philosophy behind the harmoniums. It's fun, but we'll get to that in a minute. That's chapter 8. Sorry, chapter 9. Yeah, chapter 8 and 9. But we got a little bit left over from 7 that I wanted to cover. So this I have on my copy. If you have the actual published the physical copy, it's page 167. I'm not quite sure how good that PDF lines up with the page numbers. Probably not exact. But there's 176 in the book here, close to the bottom. It kind of reveals to you this is the first time you're revealed what Rumfoord's intentions are. You know, it's like you realize, wait, so all these people are gonna get murdered and die? I mean, that guy Stoney Stevenson was strangled to death by his best friend Unk, or Malachi Constant, whatever you want to call the guy. Like all these horrible, really horrible events. His own wife was sexually assaulted, right? Or wherever you want. I don't want to use the R word because this is gonna be on YouTube later, so I don't want it to get taken off, But it's like she was practically, he was sexually assaulted pretty much. I mean, and he was like pretty much like down with it. He's like, okay, I'm gonna let this happen. I'm gonna let all these horrible things happen to these people, basically using them as pawns. But he thought it was all for the good, right? So this is on again 176. We find out sort of what is he expecting to get from all this craziness. It was Rumfoord's intention that Mars should lose the war, that Mars should lose it foolishly and horribly. As a seer of the future, Rumfoord knew for certain that this would be the case, and he was content. He wished to change the world for the better by means of the great and unforgettable suicide of Mars. As he says in his pocket history of Mars, any man who would change the world in a significant way must have showmanship, a genial willingness to shed other people's blood, and a plausible new religion to introduce during the brief period of repentance and horror that usually follows bloodshed. This is an interesting, okay, I didn't mean to sort of pause here, but after reading this, I gotta write this down. So he's got this plan. I guess that is kind of appropriate. He seems to sort of be confident. You're gonna change the world, right? You're gonna change the world. You gotta have showmanship. Okay? The invasion of Earth by the Martians, it was quite comical, but for sure it was a good show, I suppose. It was quite entertaining. The willingness to shed other people's blood, right? And then last but not least, plausible new religion. Right? Why do you need that religion? Well, you got to have something in the interim, right? Plausible new religion to introduce in the interim during this brief period of repentance and horror that usually follows bloodshed. Every failure of earthling leadership has been traceable to a lack on the part of the leader, right? Not willing to go through with all this. Of at least one of these three things. Enough of these fizzles of leadership in which millions die for nothing or less, says Rumfoord. Let's have for a change a magnificently led few who die for a great deal. Rumfoord had that magnificently led few on Mars, and he was their leader. He had showmanship. He was genially willing to shed the blood of others. And he had a plausible new religion to introduce at the war's end. And he had methods for prolonging the period of repentance and horror that would follow the war. These methods were variations on one theme, that Earth's glorious victory over Mars had been a tawdry butchery of virtually unarmed saints who had waged feeble war on Earth in order to weld the peoples of that planet into a monolithic brotherhood of man. So he thinks that he's going to bring peace on Earth. This is kind of interesting. It's, I think, a bit different. It's a variation of a theme that you find in sci-fi, science fiction novels, science fiction movies, and things like this, that what brings peace on Earth and unity to Earth is what happens, like, I think there's an episode of The Twilight Zone where this happens. Like, you know, The Twilight Zone is an old series, right? It was filmed in like the 60s during the Cold War, when there were all these tensions between Russia and the Soviet Union, USSR, and the United States. And so people were just like, is there ever gonna be world peace? Are we always gonna live under the threat of nuclear weapons? And there was this sort of science fiction fantasy of how the problem would be solved. And how would it be solved? What would bring us all together? What makes you like somebody if you don't normally like them? Under certain conditions, you might sort of team up with them.
Maybe if you don't like the continent.
Exactly, right. So you got someone invading from outer space, you got the aliens, you're kind of like, okay, let's forget about these borders for now and deal with the space aliens. So it's sort of a unifying force. But this is kind of a farce on that, because you know, usually what happens is people are under pressure because they can't fight the Martians, right? Like the Martians are so advanced, they're these aliens that have all these like superpowers or super technology, and so Americans have to get together with the Russians and put all our resources together to fight this more powerful enemy. But in this, the enemy they're weak. Like they're puny. They're a bunch of like Earthlings that like were losers on Earth, and they're either losers or they're just abducted and then brainwashed and sent to Mars. And like it was a pathetic war. Like they were just sitting ducks. And so, but it has the same effect. Like I guess Vonnegut is arguing that it brings people together, not because they're fighting a common enemy, but why? What brings them together in this case? Why does this bring peace on Earth? Why does the invasion? Why does he think it's going to bring peace on Earth? I guess maybe it doesn't quite. But why does it bring this brotherhood of man? How do they feel after the war? After the Martians are done invading, are they like, "Yay, we won"? They feel horrible, right? Why do they feel so horrible? They were killing kids and innocent people, and they realized at the end like what had really happened and like how these people were just brainwashed. And so there was this sort of collective guilt, like we just murdered a bunch of people, like this is horrible. And sort of it was this like, and almost in a way there's a parallel to the scene between Malachi and B, right? When he sees her, when the lights come on and he sees her and realizes what a horrible person he is and the horrible things that he's done. And from that point on, he just wants to be good, and he doesn't want to cause any more pain. And that's maybe why he has to be brainwashed 7 times, that guilt of what he did to that woman. You know, when he was on Earth and living this playboy lifestyle, he's like, I'm screwing this stupid, she's all fancy and doesn't want to get dirty. I'm going to write her dirty letters every month, you know. And then, you know, he gets on the ship and he's just joking around being a sleazebag, and then all of a sudden he's like, man, I went too far. This is wrong. You know, this is what I did, and that sort of guilt is sort of a moral awakening for him, I suppose. And maybe I didn't think of that till just now, but maybe there's a parallel here with the invasion of the Martians, right? Like everybody was all like remember they're all excited. Oh, we're badass. Like I want to be part of it. You know, people grab their shotgun and shoot at the ships as they're coming in. You know, like I want to be a part of this. And then they start realizing they're killing just these innocent, basically robots that have been brainwashed. And that guilt is what brings about, you know, what he thinks is going to bring about this peace on Earth. And he comes back, right? So Rumfoord comes back to the mansion, which is now like an amusement park, basically, right? So there's a big crowd waiting for him. They're all buying tickets to see him and his dog, pop up again. And so he comes, and he sort of comes with a bunch of prophecies, right? So remember, he wants to start a plausible new religion. After all this guilt, after all the mass murder of the Martians, we've got to have a new religion to sort of to ease our mind. Rumfoord this is on page 181. Rumfoord materialized on Earth in Newport twice during the war between Mars and Earth. Once just after the war started, and again on the day it ended. He and his dog had, at that time, no particular religious significance. They were merely tourist attractions. The Rumfoord estate had been leased by the mortgage holders to a showman named Martin T. Lapp. Lapp sold tickets to materializations for $1 apiece. Save for the appearance and then the disappearance of Rumfoord and his dog, it wasn't much of a show. Rumfoord wouldn't say a word to anyone but Moncrief, the butler, and he whispered to him. He would slouch broodingly in the wing chair in the room under the staircase in Skip's museum, and he would cover his eyes with one hand and twine the fingers of his other hand around Kazak's choke chain. Rumfoord and Kazak were billed as ghosts. There was a scaffolding outside the window of the little room, and the door to the corridor had been removed. 2 lines of sightseers could file past for a peek at the chronosynclastic, infundibulated man and dog. I guess you don't feel much like talking today, folks, Marlin T. Lapp would say. You gotta realize he's got a lot to think about. He isn't just here, folks. Him and his dog are all spread all the way from the sun to Betelgeuse. Till the last day of the war, all the action, all the noise was provided by Marlin T. Lapp. I think it's wonderful of all you people on this great day in the history of the world to come and see this great cultural and educational and scientific exhibit, Lapp said on the last day of the war. If this ghost ever speaks, said Lapp, he's going to tell us of wonders in the past and the future and of things in the universe as yet undreamed of. I just hope some of you are lucky enough to be here when he decides the time is right to tell us all he can. The time is ripe, said Rumfoord hollowly. The time is rotten ripe, said Winston Niles Rumfoord. The war that ends so gloriously today was glorious only for the saints who lost it. Those saints were earthlings like yourselves. They went to Mars, mounted their hopeless attacks, and died gladly in order that earthlings might at last become one people, joyful, fraternal, and proud. Their wish when they died, said Rumfoord, was not for paradise for themselves, but for that brotherhood of mankind on earth might be enduring, that the brotherhood of mankind on earth might be enduring. To that end, devotedly to be wished, said Rumfoord, I bring you word of a new religion that can be received enthusiastically in every corner of every earthling heart. National borders, said Rumfoord, will disappear. The lust for war, said Rumfoord, will die. All envy, all fear, all hate will die, said Rumfoord. The name of the new religion, said Rumfoord, is the Church of the God of the Utterly Indifferent. The flag of that church will be blue and gold, said Rumfoord. These words will be written on that flag in gold letters on a blue field. Take care of the people, and God Almighty will take care of himself. The 2 chief teachings of this new religion are these, said Rumfoord. Puny man can do nothing at all to help or please God Almighty, and luck is not the hand of God. Why should you believe in this religion rather than any other? Said Rumfoord. You should believe in it because I, as head of this religion, can work miracles, and the head of no other religion can. What miracles can I work? I can work the miracle of predicting with absolute accuracy the things that the future will bring. Rumfoord thereupon predicted 50 future events in great detail. These predictions were carefully recorded by those present. Needless to say, they all came true eventually, came true in great detail. The teachings of this religion will seem subtle and confusing at first, said Rumfoord, but they will become beautiful and crystal clear as time goes by. As a presently confusing beginning, said Rumfoord, I shall tell you a parable. Once upon a time, luck arranged things so that a baby named Malachi Constant was born the richest child on earth. On the same day, luck arranged things so that a blind grandmother stepped on a roller skate at the head of a flight of cement stairs. A policeman's horse stepped on an organ grinder's monkey, and a paroled bank robber found a postage stamp worth $900 in the bottom of a trunk in his attic. I ask you, is luck the hand of God? Rumfoord held up an index finger that was as translucent as a limo's teacup. During my next visit with you, fellow believers, he said, I shall tell you a parable about people who do things that they think God Almighty wants done. In the meanwhile, you would do well for background on this parable to read everything you can lay your hands on about the Spanish Inquisition. The next time I come to you, said Rumfoord, I shall bring you a Bible, revised so as to be meaningful in modern times. And I shall bring you a short history of Mars, a true history of the saints who died in order that the world might be united as the brotherhood of man. This history will break the heart of every human being who has a heart that can be broken. Rumfoord and his dog dematerialized abruptly. Wow, kind of a lot to unpack there, but in a way, I think you could say that Rumfoord is using a sort of utilitarian argument, a nice fancy word, utilitarian, kind of a utilitarian argument. He seems to be advocating for a kind of utilitarianism. In his well, maybe not to the crowd there, but in his mind, he's thinking, well, anybody that has to change the world has to be willing to do all this stuff. So, this sort of brotherhood of man that I'm aiming for, that I'm gonna get, right? That's the change he wants to bring about in the world. It necessitates this, right? I gotta pull off some crazy thing. I gotta invade Earth with a bunch of, brainwashed Martians. That's gonna cost a lot of life. And then I've got to come up with a completely new philosophy and do all this crazy stuff. But it's all good. It's okay. The means justify the end. Or sorry, the ends justify the means. Said it backwards. The ends, the goal, justifies the means that I use to arrive at that goal. This kind of, I don't know why, this reminds me of, what is his name from the Avengers? Thanos, or whatever the heck, right? Isn't that sort of he's sort of like, well, I kill half the universe. But it's not for peace, though, right? It's just because there's not enough stuff. Is that his?
No, he said he wanted balance.
Is it balance? Is what he wanted? Well, whatever. He's got this aim, and it's okay to murder, kill half of everything that exists to get it, because things will be better, And so this guy's kind of like, yeah. What did Lenin said once? If you want to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs or something like this. So yeah, I mean, utilitarianism. It's a philosophical, it's an ethical theory. That it basically, I hate to oversimplify it, because I'm sure that if some utilitarian ends up watching this video someday, they might, there's more to it than that. But it's basically the ends justify the means. The way it's stated by John Stuart Mill is, its aim is the greatest happiness for the greatest amount of people. So that seems like a pretty good aim. We want people to be happy. That's good to be happy. So we want to make as many people happy as possible. So the idea is, though, anything can be justified for that end. And it's like, well, what if killing half the people would make the other half super duper happy, right? Or something like this. Or what if murdering the Martians would, all these people that went to Mars and were brainwashed would make Earth peaceful? Does that justify it? For the utilitarian, it does. So I think Rumfoord is thinking like a utilitarian here. He's thinking a bit like Thanos. Maybe not quite as extreme, right? Thanos is killing half of the freaking, this is just one planet in the grand scheme of things, but it's a similar kind of a logic, And it's a popular theory in ethics. I don't particularly care for it. I should lay my cards on the table. So maybe I'm not giving it the best representation here. But I think one of the big problems I have with it is that I think it tries to oversimplify some of these issues, and it can often lead to some pretty devastating results if you use this sort of thinking. there's all sorts of thought experiments. You know, you could probably find them on the internet if you look on YouTube or look at philosophy videos on utilitarianism. You know, there's the famous Trolley Experiment. What's her name? Judith Thompson. Judy Jarvis Thompson. She wrote this article about the trolley. You know, what if there's a trolley or like a train on a track, and there's one person who's tied up to that train, or sorry, there's 5 people tied up to that train track, and you're standing right next to this lever. You could pull that lever and the train will move to the next track over. Problem is, on the next track there's another person who's tied up. So you either just do nothing and let the 5 people die, or you pull the lever and the train moves to the other track and you kill just 1 instead of 5. Okay, so utilitarian would say, well, freaking pull the lever. You know, pull the lever. And I'm thinking maybe that is the right thing to do. Like, just assume you don't know the people, you don't have time to talk to them. You know, for all you know, it's just 5 people versus 1 person. You don't know that one person is like a bad guy and the other 5 are a good guy. You don't know. You just know that it's 5 lives versus 1. And so the utilitarian says the most happiness for the most people. So it's okay, you know, pull that lever. 1 guy died, that sucks, horrible for him, but you saved the 5. So it's cut and dry, right? But to me, it's like, well, I don't know if it's cut and dry. You know, it's like it's a complicated issue, and maybe the right thing is to pull the lever. But I don't know. It just seems like this can go pretty far too. I heard one example. Like, what if there's a guy who's he's kind of a loser, let's say. He's lazy, he's a loser, he doesn't like work, he just collects unemployment, he like sits home all day eating pizza and watching Netflix or whatever. But there's like, he's got a certain blood type that is exactly right for these 5 different people who are all in the hospital. And if we took him and killed him and murdered him and harvested his organs, we could split up, like give his kidney to this one woman, give the liver to this other guy, give his heart to this. We would save 5 lives. And so the argument is, well, if he's a loser and he doesn't really contribute much to the greater happiness of society, but these other people, one's a doctor, let's say, the other's like a teacher, the other's like let's say they're all good people, then the utilitarian would say, well, yeah, you should go murder that guy and take his organs and then like distribute it to the better citizens, you know? And I would say to that, like, no, that's wrong. It's right that, let's say he wanted to sacrifice himself for them. You know, and he would say, you know, I'm just some loser guy and I don't do much, so these people are good, I'm gonna sacrifice myself and donate my body to them, you know. Then it's like, wow, what a great guy, you know, like that was good that he did that. What a sacrifice. Like, I could see the argument for that, but I wouldn't say, like, to some utilitarians, you have to say he has a duty to do that. He has to offer his life for them, right? Because it's the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. So I think, again, Rumfoord is saying, hey, I forgot the number, but it's like 250,000 or something that had to die. I forgot, he gives like a tally of all the people that died invading Earth. I think, was it four Earthlings died and like 725,000 number, some wacky number of Martians died. So I guess if it brings about a brotherhood of man and world peace, is it worth it? Maybe I read too many comic books when I was like a teenager, but now I'm starting to think of the Watchmen. Did you ever watch Watchmen? Who's the guy? There's a character in Watchmen. I think Quasimodo is the guy's name. He's the world's smartest man, and you know, I hate to tell you because it's totally going to spoil the movie for you. Gives away the ending, but he basically, well, I guess this doesn't completely spoil the movie. He basically has the same idea. He's gonna basically kill everybody to save everybody. He kills them. He's like, well, I'm smart. I'm gonna make this big disaster, and everybody's gonna be like, oh my god, and like, you know, there's gonna be this huge. I'm not gonna give too much away, but there's a huge disaster in New York, and like because of that, you've seen Watchmen. Or you read the comic book? Yeah. So it's like, is it Quasimodo's the name of the guy? Right. Right, exactly. I got all these people die, kill all these people, you know, blame it on this other thing, and then everyone would band together, and then there'll be like peace on earth and all that stuff. And what's interesting about the Watchmen, that's which I kind of like at the end of it. It's sort of anti-utopian because it works and everyone's like happy, but it doesn't last long because it gets boring, right? It's like the last scene, if you watch the movie version in the film, the last scene, they're like at the newspaper and the reporter is like, this sucks. There's nothing to report about. Everyone's just like holding hands and singing kumbaya. Like, where's the war? Where's the crime? Where's the stories? Like, there's no history. Like, there's nothing. But then he finds the diary of like one of the watchmen that tells the whole story of what really happened. And so I guess it kind of like leaves open, like, it's not the end. They did a show, I think Showtime or HBO did like a sequel to it. It was all right. It wasn't as good as the original, but anyway. So yeah, so this is interesting. He's got this sort of Thanos type plan, which totally fails. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. I don't think it's that clear. Remember in chapter 1 of the book, it's made apparent that whoever's telling us this story is living in some future society where they've kind of figured everything out, that everything's inside our soul and all this stuff. So I don't know, it's not made very clear, but maybe this is the beginning of it, right? Maybe this sort of brotherhood of man, maybe it did lead to something better on Earth, or at least that's what Vonnegut is trying to have us believe in the book here. What does it say though? Like he says that the flag of the church of the God of the utterly indifferent, the flag says, take care of the people and God Almighty will take care of himself. This, in a way, maybe it's an allusion to the sort of Leaning Tower of Pisa metaphor that we got in the beginning of the book, right? Remember the Reverend Bobby Denton talking about, why are we flying into space? This is just like the Leaning Tower, not the Leaning Tower of Pisa, the Tower of Babel, right? The Tower of Babel from the Bible, or trying to build the Tower of the Sky, and God confused them and stuff. Remember, how did Rumfoord get stuck in the chronosynclastic infundibulum? How did he get stuck? He's flying a spaceship, right? So sort of this idea that there's a limit, and God was sort of saying, stop, just leave me alone, right? You know enough. You don't need to know anymore. Go back to Earth and be a good husband. Be a good, I guess you can't do that, right? Be something, right? Love the people you can love, that kind of thing. And so I guess this is sort of, the religion is, God is utterly indifferent to you, right? Stop trying to impress him. Stop trying to worry about what he don't care. This is kind of like Aristotle's God. Aristotle, many early Christians and some of the early Muslims, they loved Aristotle because of his arguments for God's existence. And Aristotle did believe there was a God, and Aristotle did believe there was one God. It was a monotheistic, perfect being that was a creator of all that is, and that was an object that we should emulate and that we should worship. But Aristotle thought, this is where the Christians and the Muslims and the Jews kind of were like, he thought this guy didn't care about us. He's too busy thinking about how awesome he is. That was kind of Aristotle. It was like, God is perfect. His thoughts are perfect. He only thinks of perfect stuff. So he only thinks of himself because he's the only perfect thing. And why would he, this idea that God knows God knows how many grains of sand are on the beach. God knows like the position of every hair on your head, and like at every second. And Aristotle's like, no, he's not worried about your freaking hair. He's got much greater, grander things to contemplate. But this is a God that is beyond us. Remember, another point. I don't know if we went over this last time, but it was in reference to Rumfoord, and it was, I think, a quote from some fictitious book that Vonnegut made up, talking about Rumfoord, talking about the chronosynclastic infundibulum, saying, it sounds like the chronosynclastic infundibulum would be a really great place to be. Remember, this is the place where you see all time at once, and all these views that seem to sort of contradict kind of come together. But it's actually not a good place to be, right? You really don't want to be there, right? Now I'm starting to think of the Watchmen again, because the Watchmen, remember the character, what's his name, Dr. Manhattan? Dr. Manhattan he's the blue guy that walks around with his wang just hanging out like everywhere, right? But he can do everything, right? Like he can just say like, okay, I want to make you just disappear because I feel like it, and you just turn to dust, right? But he learns how to manipulate matter. He learns how to manipulate energy to make it do whatever he wants it to do. But he loses all his soul. Right? He has no passion. He has no love. He just sees things very calmly, abstractly, very matter-of-factly. I think like the woman that's in love with him, he can't really be there for her. Like they're getting it on, and he's like in the other room, like 5 or 6 different versions of him are in the other room doing like physics experiments, and she realizes, you said you were gonna split up when we were, making love. And he's like, I'm sorry, I'm just, not into this. It's like, he's completely, you got all this information, you see everything fits together, but you're not a human being anymore. You're no longer, you've got no passion and no blood running through your veins, really, right? So that's sort of the Dr. Manhattan zombie kind of. This is kind of the, what do you want? You want absolute wisdom? You want to be God? Well, if you were God, then, you would be perfect. You'd be infinite. You'd be unchangeable, right? You'd be eternal. Part of your existence, having a life, is a direct contradiction to all those things. You're imperfect. You're not eternal. You only live for a short amount of time. And that's what makes things have the value that they have, right? So focus on the here and now and forget about all this great beyond stuff. That seems to be the message, or one of the overall messages of the novel. And it seems like one of the characters learns it fairly early on, I guess. Not that early on, it takes a couple hundred pages, but I would argue that in chapters 8 and 9, Boaz, for some reason, he finds his Hollywood nightclub. Or whatever the equivalent, right? He realizes the Hollywood nightclub's bullshit, right? And then he finds happiness somehow in an awkward way. How does Boaz find happiness? Where do they end up, first off? So Unk and Boaz, they show up. Are they a part of the invasion of Earth? No. They're completely confused, right? They're way behind the pack, right? They don't get up off of their ship till later. And then they end up where? Right, they end up like deep down in the depths of Mercury, right? Like caverns way below. The ship just keeps guiding them lower and lower into the dark caverns. And they're stuck there for like 3 years. And how does them being stuck there affect Unk versus Boaz? It's like day and night.
They split up for a year.
Yeah, they don't really hang out much. They see each other every once in a while. I think it's like every couple months or once a month or something. And then very briefly, and they just he comes to the ship. They leave the ship in a spot because there's all these supplies in it, food and goofballs, so they can breathe without having oxygen. But yeah, like how do they develop? How does Unk experience this 2 or 3 years versus Boaz?
Boaz was a lot happier. He was with the harmonious.
Yeah, he really became attached to the harmoniums.
And Unk was the exact opposite. He was out exploring.
Right.
He was very unhappy.
Right.
He didn't really like the harmonious.
Yeah, he couldn't stand it. He thought they were annoying and didn't understand what Boaz saw in them.
Yeah.
And Boaz too, it's like he really kept himself together too, right? Like both of their uniforms were cheap as can be, so they had fallen apart. So both these guys are walking around buck-ass naked, right? But Boaz had kept he shined his shoes every day. He kept fit, like he had dumbbells, so he was lifting weights. I think they talked about his back being all ripped, like he had this really, he was like he looked like Hercules or something, And then Unk, the opposite, right? He let himself go. He was like this wizard-looking dude with scrawny and long hair and pale and searching. Maybe too, I don't know. I think because Boaz found something to love and something to care about, as odd as it is to fall in love with these creatures in that sense, that maybe is what allowed him to do this. Whereas Unk is like, he's basically, the way that Vonnegut puts it in his description is that he was searching for abstractions. He was looking for Stoney Stevenson. He was looking for Chrono or Bee, his wife. But like, these were just ideas in his head. Then he remembers his name for a second, Malachi Constant. He doesn't know what it means or what it's attached to. But so he's kind of like dwelling, and he's looking for meaning. He's looking for something. He doesn't really have it, right? And so, yeah, like you said, he's exploring a lot. He gets lost, goes way out, goes as far as you can go to the perimeter, right? Mercury, half of it is frozen, the other half is dark and all this stuff. And so he goes as far as he can go and then comes back. And so really try to find a passage where they explain this a bit. I want to talk about the harmoniums first, because I think that comes first, right? There are creatures in the deep caves of Mercury. This is on 188. The song their planet sings is important to them, for the creatures are nourished by vibrations. They feed on mechanical energy. The creatures cling to the singing walls of their caves. In that way, they eat the song of Mercury. The caves of Mercury are cozily warm in their depths. The walls of the caves in their depths are phosphorescent. They give off jonquil yellow light. The creatures in the caves are translucent. When they cling to the walls, light from the phosphorescent walls comes right through them. The yellow light from the walls, however, is turned when passing through the bodies of the creature to a vivid aquamarine. Nature is a wonderful thing. So I'm kind of imagining these, like, I don't know why, but when I was like a kid reading this, I was like 13 first time I read this, I was like imagining stingrays that look like jellyfish. Because he said that they're shaped like a kite. You know, they're real thin. They're about 1 foot long and about 8 inches wide. You can see through them. I don't know why, but I was just thinking of like a stingray, like this flat thing with like the little pintail, but like see-through like a jellyfish would be, you know, like little electrical jolts or whatever in it. But the creatures in the cave look very much like small and spineless kites. They are diamond-shaped, 1 foot high and 8 inches wide when fully mature. They have no more thickness than the skin of a toy balloon. Each creature has 4 feeble suction cups, one at each of its corners. These cups enable it to creep, something like a measuring worm, to cling, and to feel out the places where the song of Mercury is best. Having found a place that promises a good meal, the creatures lay themselves against the wall like wet wallpaper. There is no need for a circulatory system in these creatures. They are all so thin that life-giving vibrations can make all their cells tingle without intermediaries. That's an interesting thing he makes up about them, right? That's another thing that I'm like, are these supposed to be like the perfect creature? That's what I'm thinking, like, so they don't even have any like veins or organs or anything like that. Like all their cells are like distributed properly through their body, through their, I don't know how you put it, their consumption of the vibrations around them. The creatures do not excrete. Yeah, they don't even waste anything. So that's another, they're like perfect. They don't excrete. Like the king, like the president of North Korea, right? You know that he tells that to, like, he never uses the bathroom or whatever. Kim Jong-un. Yeah, he doesn't. Yeah, exactly. The Harmonians don't either, right? These creatures don't poop. They don't excrete. They reproduce by flaking. So they're asexual, right? There's no sexual reproduction. It's asexual. They just, a part of them flakes off and becomes another Harmonian. The young, when shed by a parent, are indistinguishable from dandruff. There is only one sex. Every creature simply sheds flakes of his own kind, and his own kind is like everyone else's kind. There's no childhood as such. Flakes begin flaking 3 earthling hours after they themselves have been shed. They do not reach maturity, they deteriorate and die. They reach maturity, stay in full bloom, so to speak, for as long as Mercury cares to sing. So what's keeping them alive are these vibrations. This is another interesting point about him, and we're going to get to this later in the chapter, this idea that music is a key here, right? Music is a key to finding this togetherness, this unity or whatnot. And I think music has a lot to do with time too, right? Time is a theme throughout this book. Music is always measured out in time. But this is interesting though. The creatures can't hear the vibrations; they feel them. There's no way in which one creature can harm another, and no motive for one's harming another. Hunger, envy, ambition, fear, indignation, religion, and sexual lust are irrelevant and unknown. The creatures have only one sense: touch. They have weak powers of telepathy. The messages they are capable of transmitting and receiving are almost as monotonous as the song of Mercury. They have only 2 possible messages. The first is an automatic response to the second, and the second is an automatic response to the first. The first is, here I am, here I am, here I am. The second is, so glad you are, so glad you are, so glad you are. Right? They're just so happy to be together. There's one last characteristic of the creatures that has not been explained on utilitarian grounds. The creatures seem to like to arrange themselves in striking patterns on the phosphorescent walls. Though blind and indifferent to anyone's watching, they often arrange themselves so as to present a regular and dazzling pattern of jonquil yellow and vivid aquamarine diamonds. The yellow ones come from the bare cave walls. The aquamarine is the light of the walls filtered through the bodies of the creatures. Because of their love of music and their willingness to deploy themselves in the service of beauty, the creatures are given a lovely name by earthlings. They are called harmonians. Right? Yeah, so again, I almost want to like just sort of philosophically contemplate the existence of such creatures and what the heck is going on with these things. But yeah, again, they're sort of, I don't want to call them perfect creatures though, because they seem sort of darn pathetic, right? They're like spineless jellyfish, right? In a way, what does he say? There's no hunger, no envy, no ambition, no fear, no indignation, religion, sexual lust. They're irrelevant and unknown. Well, that sounds so peaceful and tranquil, but also like, again, boring. I don't know. It's like the end of the Watchmen movie. One kind of, I guess, important part of the story, I guess the plot, is that there is a utilitarian ground for mentioning this. Why is it important that they make patterns on the walls? What happens later on in these chapters? Where do the patterns come in? These guys get stuck, right? Their ship gets stuck at the bottom of the planet of Mercury. There's only 2 buttons on the ship, on and off, right? And what happens when they push the on button? Yeah, the ship goes berserk. It's kind of stuck, right? It keeps hitting the wall and then coming back down and hitting the wall and coming back down. So it won't let them leave, right? So they're stuck in this cave. How do they get out? They keep getting clues. How? What's that?
From the harmonians.
Yeah, well, kind of, yeah.
It's from Rumfoord.
Yeah, Rumfoord is kind of in on this. They don't know. They never find out, I guess. They never find out. But he'll materialize on Mercury every so often, and he peels them off the wall and, you know, writes a message for Unk and Boaz so they can kind of figure it out. They eventually, takes them forever. It takes them, 2 or 3 years, and they figure out how to get out of the cave. How do they get out of the cave? What was the riddle? Turn the ship upside down. Yeah. Just turn it upside down, then hit on, and it'll be just fine. It'll think it's upside down and try to go low, and that's what happens. Okay, well, I'm going to skip quite a bit the next few pages. I'm looking for a passage, the passage I was kind of talking about earlier, where it gives us a kind of an inkling of the state of our 2 characters, right? Unk and Boaz.
Or Unk is in 191.
191?
Yeah, like the little, it says how he starts remembering or wants to remember the names.
Well, yeah, there's that. I'm looking for that passage that's talking about like Boaz getting all ripped to take care of himself, and I think that might be the next chapter, so maybe we should wait. It's on 201, I think. Yeah, 201 kind of gives us a description of kind of how they've been faring. So it is in the next chapter. But, oh yeah, one thing too, and I don't know if this has come up yet, but something happens every once in a while when Unk and Boaz encounter each other. And Boaz at this point has become quite attached to the harmoniums, right? What does he do? He takes care of them, and he lets them kind of rest on his pulse. They like that, you know. And what else does he do for them? He plays music for them, right? So Rumfoord had collected all these pieces of classical music, all these great, and the first time it happened, he ended up killing a bunch of them because they got too close to the machine, to the speaker, so they shriveled up into these orange peel things and died. And he freaks out, right? He starts crying, oh my no, So he figures out a way to put like a sheet in front of it and kind of get it all safe so they can enjoy the music, right? And how does Unk feel about this? You don't really get much of like a back and forth, but you can kind of tell what is Unk's attitude about Boaz and Boaz liking the harmoniums. You said he didn't like the harmoniums, but
He's kind of like, I don't want to say angry, but he doesn't really like it.
yeah, he thinks it's stupid, I think. He's kind of like, it's just childish, this is stupid. We're stuck here, you idiot. Like, we need to get off this place. you know, this is ridiculous. And Boaz is kind of like, I don't understand people like you, you know?
It was like, what made him so angry? Or
Right, what makes you so negative?
Yeah.
You know, why are you so mad about everything? You know, this is one thing I mentioned last time that I kind of wish I would have covered today because I don't think I spent enough time on it last time. But that scene at the end when Boaz, at the end of, I think, chapter 7, when Boaz finally realizes the situation he's got himself into, how does he react? He starts laughing his ass off, right? He starts laughing at himself. He says, Boaz, what kind of, you got yourself up in space on a freaking, geez. You know, you thought you had everything under control. You thought you had your remote control in your pocket. You're going to go to this Hollywood nightclub, and man, you're an idiot. And he had a good sense of humor about himself, kind of. He was able to sort of laugh it off and make the best, I guess, out of a tough situation. Whereas Unk is kind of like, you're stupid, Boaz. Like, what a freaking idiot. How can you be so, like, happy here? You know, and Boaz makes a deal with Unk. He says, look, you're probably right. You sound smart. I don't want to know that. Don't truth me. How does he put it? Don't truth me and I won't truth you. Is that how he says it? Yeah, don't truth me and I won't truth you. Because he knows something about Unk that would probably just devastate him and make him commit suicide. What does he know about Unk?
And he killed Stone.
He knows that Unk is the one, he murdered his friend Stoney Stevenson. He's like, I can tell you that, you'll go nuts. You'll probably lose your will to live, right? And so I'm just gonna, and this is an interesting point about, I think this is another recurring theme through the book. Remember when Unk is reading the letter and he hears about anytime you feel pain, that's a good sign that you're learning something you're not supposed to learn. And he's like, I don't want to learn. I don't want pain. I want away from the pain. This idea that, no pain, no gain. No pain, no knowledge. And Boaz is like, man, maybe knowledge is overrated. I don't want to be like this wild-ass crazy dude with a dog running into my spaceship into the chronosynclastic infundibula just so I can have all the answers to everything. I'm happy with my freaking harmoniums, man. I'm cool here. So, I know I'm a stupid idiot. I know, you probably talk to me and explain me why I'm a dumbass and why I should be freaking out, why I should not be happy, but I don't want to hear it. Don't truth me and I won't truth you, right? So in a way, Boaz is a bit smarter, I think, than Unk is. And in fact, I have a friend who argues that he thinks Boaz is the real hero of the book, that Boaz is the only one that really ever gets it, But I think that's a fun reading of the book, but I don't know, it's kind of silly. But let's read, this is the passage I was looking for, it's on 201. It says, Unk and Boaz had been on Mercury for 3 earthling years when Unk found Kazak's footprints in the dust on the floor of a cave corridor. Mercury had carried Unk and Boaz 12.5 times around the sun. Unk found the prints on a floor 6 miles above the chamber in which the dented, scarred, and rock-bound spaceship lay. Unk didn't live in the spaceship anymore, and neither did Boaz. The spaceship served merely as a common supply base to which Unk and Boaz returned for provisions once every earthly month or so. Unk and Boaz rarely met. They moved in very different circles. The circles in which Boaz moved were small. His abode was fixed and richly furnished. It was on the same level as the spaceship, only a quarter of a mile away from it. So, he's grounded. Like, he's not moving far. He's not looking for anything. He's cool. I got my food. I got my harmoniums. I'm going to chill. I'm going to chill here. Whereas, let's see what happens with Unk. The circles in which Unk moved were vast and restless. He had no home. He traveled light. He traveled far, climbing ever higher until he was stopped by cold. Where the cold stopped Unk, the cold stopped the harmoniums too. On the upper levels where Unk wandered, the harmoniums were stunted and few. This passage, it brings to mind, for me at least, it brings to mind Heidegger. Heidegger's a German philosopher. I think I might have mentioned it before. We're actually, if you're interested in doing the extra credit this month, that's what we're covering is Heidegger. But Heidegger talks a lot about homelessness. But it's not what you're thinking. It's not just like homelessness as like the guy on the street being homeless. Heidegger thought that modern humans, modern people, were in a state of homelessness, that we weren't at home, that we didn't feel at home in the world. There was something unheimlich, unhomelike, uncanny about modern existence. In a way, I think that this draws from Kierkegaard. Remember, we talked a little about how Kierkegaard felt about modernity, that the modern sort of post-scientific revolution, post-industrial world has brought us a lot of gadgets, a lot of convenience, a lot of technology that has made life easier. But the sort of price we've paid is a lack of purpose and meaning, that there's really no meaning or purpose in our life. We feel not at home. Where's our place? And so I guess Unk is, feeling this. He's homeless, right? He has no home. Boaz does. Boaz has found his home. He's found his space. On the cozy lower level where Boaz lived, the harmoniums were plentiful and fast growing. Boaz and Unk had separated after one earthling year together in the spaceship. In that first year together, it had become clear to both of them that they weren't going to get out unless something or somebody came and got them out. That had been clear. Even though the creatures on the walls continued to spell out new messages, emphasizing the fairness of the test to which Unk and Boaz were being subjected, the ease with which they might escape, if only they would think a little harder, if they would only think a little more intricately. Think, the creatures would say. Unk and Boaz separated after Unk went temporarily insane. Unk had tried to murder Boaz. Boaz had come into the spaceship with a harmonium, which was exactly like all the other harmoniums. And he'd said, "Ain't he a cute little feller, Unk?" Unk had gone for Boaz's throat. Right? So again, he's not, I think, again, Unk is kind of like, again, he's homeless, right? I think literally homeless, obviously, like he's got no place to go because he doesn't know who the hell he is, right? But he's even homeless, I think, in that Heideggerian sense of I've got no place in the universe. Like I vaguely have a concept of my best friend Stoney Stevenson and my wife Bee and my son Chrono, and I'm sort of like hoping to find Stoney, and then when I find him, then we're gonna conquer the universe together. We're gonna figure this out. We're gonna get out of here. Everything's gonna be fine. But until then, he's just, again, like this sort of homeless, temporarily insane, as it says here. And he gets mad and angry when he meets somebody who's grounded like Boaz is. He's just like, it's not that easy. You should be as bleak as me, basically, right? And I'm skipping a lot more of that. But yeah, the sort of point is Boaz is really, really taken to this. So, let's see. Let's get close to the end of the chapter. I kind of want to get to the scene where they have their final encounter. 209. 209, we hear about Boaz's concerts. Then finally, okay, so he finds the message, what is it? Unk finds the message that says, turn the ship upside down, basically, right? On 212. You don't know what the message is yet on 212. You find out in a minute, but Unk sees a message. It's like, oh, that's how we get the hell out of here. He starts running back to the camp. The message told Unk in 5 words how to escape surely, easily, and swiftly from the caves. He was bound to admit, when given the solution to the puzzle that he had failed to solve in 3 years, that the puzzle was simple and fair. Unk scuttled down through the caves until he came upon Boaz's concert for the harmoniums. Unk was wild and bug-eyed with big news. He could not speak in a vacuum, so he hauled Boaz to the spaceship. There, in the inert atmosphere of the cabin, Unk told Boaz of the message that meant escape from the caves. It was now Boaz's turn to react numbly. Boaz had thrilled to the slightest illusion of intelligence on the part of the harmoniums. But now, having heard the news that he was about to be freed from his prison, Boaz was strangely reserved. That explains that other message, said Boaz softly. What other message? Asked Unk. Boaz held up his hands to represent a message that had appeared on the wall outside his home 4 earthling days before. It said, "Boaz, don't go." He looked down self-consciously. "We love you, Boaz." That's what it said. Boaz dropped his hands to his side, turned away as though turning away from unbearable beauty. "I saw that," he said, "and I had to smile. I looked at them sweet, gentle fellers on the wall there. And I says to myself, boys, how's old Boaz ever gonna go anywhere? Old Boaz, he's gonna be stuck here for quite some time yet. It's a trap, said Unk. It's a what? Said Boaz. A trap, said Unk. A trick to keep us here. So what goes on? What is so now Unk is gonna try to convince him, and he's like, don't truth me, right? Don't truth me. What does Boaz end up doing? He stays behind. Right? He stays on Mercury with these creatures, right? Because he loves them and they love him apparently. Or do they love him? That's not really clear. Was it Rumfoord that spelled, please don't go, we love you, Boaz? Was Rumfoord like, I think he's gonna mess things up if he's there, so let's get him to stay? That'd be kind of messed up. Well, maybe not, because he likes it, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, he's not. What do you think? Is it supposed to be Rumfoord that did that, or did the harmoniums do it? It'd be kind of fantastic for the harmoniums to do it, because they don't really. They just have the taste. Like they can just feel stuff. All they do is feel vibration. Yeah, they wouldn't be able to spell the word. Yeah, it must have been Rumfoord, right? But maybe Rumfoord is doing this to make it easier on Boaz. I don't know. Like it's easier. See, I've got evidence. See. You know, you're gonna call me crazy, but like they told me this, so it'll make it easier for him to stay behind. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it'd have to be Rumfoord. It wasn't the Harmonians didn't tell him they loved him. The comic book called Tweety and Sylvester was open on the table. That's all they have is that one comic book, right? Tweety and Sylvester. It was open on a table before Boaz. Boaz didn't answer Unk right away. He leafed through the ragged book instead. I expect, he said at last. Unk thought about the crazy appeal in the name of love. He did something he hadn't done for a long time. He laughed. He thought it was an hysterical ending for the nightmare, that the brainless membranes on the wall should speak of love. Boaz suddenly grabbed Unk, rattled poor Unk's dry bones. I'd appreciate it, Unk, said Boaz tautly, if you just let me think whatever I'm going to think about that message, about how they love me. I mean, he said, doesn't necessarily have to make sense to you. I mean, there ain't really any call for you to say anything about it, one way or the other. I mean, these animals ain't necessarily your dish. You don't necessarily have to like them or understand them or say anything about them. I mean, the message wasn't addressed to you. It's to me they said they love. So that lets you out. That lets you off the hook. He let Unk go, turned attention to the comic book again. His broad, brown, slab-muscled back amazed Unk. Living apart from Boaz, Unk had flattered himself into thinking he was a physical match for Boaz. He saw now what a pathetic delusion this had been. The muscles in Boaz's back slid over one another in slow patterns that were counterpoint to the quick movements of his page-turning fingers. You know so much about traps and things, said Boaz. How you know there ain't some worse trap waiting for us if we go flying out of here? Before Unk could answer him, Boaz remembered that he had left the tape recorder playing and unguarded. Ain't nobody watching out for him out there, he cried. He left Unk, he ran to rescue the harmoniums. While Boaz was gone, Unk made plans for turning the spaceship upside down. That was the solution to the puzzle of how to get out. That was what the harmoniums on the ceiling had said. Unk, turn the ship upside down. Right, and so let's getting forward back to the sort of the dialogue between Boaz. So Boaz came into this is on 2:15. Boaz came into the upside down ship. His arms were loaded with dead harmoniums. He was carrying 4 quarts or more of the seeming dried apricots. Inevitably, he dropped some, and in stooping to pick them up reverently, he dropped more. Tears were streaming down his face. You see, said Boaz. He was raging heartbrokenly against himself. You see, Unk, he said. See what happens when somebody just runs off and forgets? Boaz shook his head. This ain't all of them, he said. This ain't near all of them. He found an empty carton that had once contained candy bars. He put the harmonium corpses into that. He straightened up, his hands on his hips. Just as Unk had been amazed by Boaz's physical condition, so was Unk now amazed by Boaz's dignity. Boaz, when he straightened up, was a wise, decent, weeping brown Hercules. Unk, by comparison, felt scrawny, rootless and sore-headed. You want to do the dividing, Unk? Said Boaz. Dividing, said Unk. Goofballs, food, soda pop candy, said Boaz. Divide it all, said Unk. My God, there's enough of everything for 500 years. There had never been any talk of dividing things before. There had been no shortage and no threat of shortage of anything. Half for you to take with you and half to leave here with me, said Boaz. Leave with you? Said Unk incredulously. You're coming with me, aren't you? Boaz held up his big right hand, and it was a tender gesture for silence, a gesture made by a thoroughly great human being. Don't truth me, Unk, said Boaz, and I won't truth you. He brushed away his tears with a fist. Unk had never been able to brush aside the plea about truthing. It frightened him. Some part of his mind warned him that Boaz was not bluffing, that Boaz really knew a truth about Unk that could tear him to pieces. Unk opened his mouth and closed it again. You come and tell me the big news, said Boaz. Boaz, you say we're going to be free. And I get all excited and I drop everything I'm doing and I get set to be free. And I keep saying it over to myself about how I'm going to be free, said Boaz. And then I try to think, what's that going to be like? And all I can see is people. They push me this way and they push me that way, and nothing pleases them. And they get madder and madder on account of nothing that makes them happy. And they holler at me on account of I ain't made them happy. And we all push and pull some more. And then all of a sudden, said Boaz, I remember all the crazy little animals I've been making so happy, so easy with music. And I go find thousands of them lying around dead on account of Boaz forgot all about them. He was so excited about being free. And every one of them lost lives I could have saved if I just kept my mind on what I was doing. And I say to myself, I ain't never been nothing good to people. People never been nothing good to me. So what I want to be free in crowds of people for? And then I knew what I was going to say to you, Unk, when I got back here. I found me a place where I can do good without doing any harm. And I can see I'm doing good. And them I'm doing good for, I know I'm doing it. And they love me, Unk, as best they can. I found me a home. And when I die down here someday, said Boaz, I'm going to be able to say to myself, Boaz, you made millions of lives worth living. Ain't nobody ever spread more joy. You ain't got an enemy in the universe. Boaz became for himself the affectionate mama and papa he'd never been, or he never had. You go to sleep now, he said to himself, imagining himself on a stone deathbed in the caves. You're a good boy, Boaz, he said. Good night. So again, I don't know, Boaz, he finds his nirvana, I guess, like chilling at the bottom of a cave with a bunch of stingray-looking jellyfish creatures that look aqua when they're up against the cave wall or whatnot. But this last few lines he says, I lost the page already. I'm also starting to pick up on another theme that I had never really picked up before on this book, this theme of pain, right? Causing pain and being at the receiving end of it. And he's sort of, he's kind of thinking, geez, what am I going to go back to if I go back with you to Earth, right? At the beginning of the book, he's thinking like, I can't wait to get back to Earth, because what am I going to do when I get there? We're gonna obviously win the war, he's thinking, and then me and Unk are gonna go visit the Hollywood nightclubs and party, and yay, it's gonna be so great. But then reality kind of sets in. He realizes what a fool he's been, and this has all been something that's beyond his control. He thought he was in control, and in reality, he's just sort of a pawn in some larger game. But now he sees a way out. Now he's like, oh, now I can go back to Earth, but what is there for me there? What do I have to look forward to there? Pretty sad, I guess, but at least he found happiness. They're on Mercury. But what's on Earth? People who push me this way, push me that way. Nothing pleases them. They get madder and madder on account of nothing makes them happy. And they holler at me on account of I ain't made them happy, and we all push and pull some more. And then all of a sudden I remember all the crazy little animals I've been making so happy, so easy with music. And then he says close to the bottom, I found a place where I can do good without doing any harm. I can see that I'm doing good, and them I'm doing good for know I'm doing it. They love me, Unk, as best they can. I found me a home. I can't remember the exact line, but once you get close to the end of the book, you get the meaning of life, according to Kurt Vonnegut. At least I think this is what he's trying to say. And I can't remember the exact wording, so we'll have to repeat it when we get there, but it's something like, the meaning of life is to learn how to love the people that you're stuck with, basically, or love the ones you're with, right, basically. You don't have control over that. You might be thinking, hey, one day I'm gonna go to the Hollywood nightclub and me and Unk are gonna be the talk of the town. We're gonna get all the wine and all the women and all the song, and it's gonna be great and dandy. And it's like you work your whole life trying to get to this goal when you've got so many important things already there that you just take for granted, There's a book, this kind of reminds me of it's not a book, it's a play. There's a play by Samuel Beckett called Waiting for Godot. Has anyone ever heard of this play? Waiting for Godot? Beckett, Samuel Beckett? No? You've heard of it? You ever seen it before? You know what the story is? There's not really much of a story. What's it about? That's it. Yeah. Two guys waiting for Godot. That's it. Right? And the whole play, they're sitting there, they're like, man, when's this guy going to show up? Right? Like, well, he'll be here. When he shows up, he'll tell us what to do. When he shows up, everything's going to be great. He's going to have this answers for us, Mr. Godot. At the end of Act 1, some guy shows up. They're like, oh, are you here? He's like, no, I'm not a Godot. He couldn't make it today. He'll be here. He'll be here next time. So stick around. And then they wait, they wait. And he never shows up. And this is supposed to be kind of like a metaphor, I guess, for life. How so? How are we waiting for Godot?
Like God, maybe?
Well, that could be it. It could be a religious, like I want God to like show me the way or whatever. But I mean, for Boaz, it was like, I just need to follow this Unk dude. We get to Earth, I'm gonna be living the dream with the Hollywood nightclubs, rocking out like some gangster, pimping, whatever. He's got this fantasy in his mind, basically, right?
It's like we're all waiting to be like somewhere it's like
Right.
our goal.
Right. The movie Fight Club. You ever seen Fight Club? Anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, at the beginning of the movie, like the guy, Ed Norton character, he's like talking to Brad Pitt on the airplane. He's like, well, when I get my condo, when I get my job, when I gotta get all this and that, and then I can live, right? And then I can do all that, but not until I get all this stuff straight. And so that's waiting for Godot. You never do anything, just waiting for that perfect moment. Where, heck, man, stuff's going on right now. Take advantage of the moment, right? What is it? Carpe diem, right? Seize the day. All right, well, we're out of time, so I better stop the video there. But